Welcome to another episode of CoachesCorner.health. We're excited that you're here with us today. We've been talking about being ready to date and how to get out into the dating world to find your match. And today we're going to be wrapping up this series by diving into and covering relationship values and going beyond chemistry so that you can step into your relationship with confidence. But before we get started, let me tell you who I am. My name is Leslie Cadet, and I am a self care coach. I work with female coaches and course creators, helping them prioritize self care in their life and business to support them so they wake up with more energy, joy, focus, and intention to tackle whatever they have going on in their life and business, and they can support and powerfully support their clients. So, Andy, tell us who you are.
Thank you, Leslie. I love your introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone. I am the unconditional coach. I help people with boundaries and control issues and all the things related to that, typically in relationships. And guess what? Most of those are all based on the values that we each have in our relationships. And today's discussion is all about values. And I love this discussion. As I was just mentioning before we started recording, I've recently written a chapter on this in my book. Leslie and I have talked about values a lot, both in relationships and in different kinds of situations. So this is a topic that's really near and dear to me, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So why don't you start us off, Leslie? Tell us a little bit about your values and what was important to you when you first started dating your husband.
Yeah, so honestly, I didn't really know what I didn't know back then because I really wasn't in this space understanding, you know, really, the values that I had were what were leading me to, choose a partner. But I did know at that time the things that I didn't really want in my life anymore. I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose myself in my relationships because that was usually my standard operating procedures, if you will. I would attract somebody and obviously not really cluing in that the person that I was already was good enough. That's what they were attracted to in the first place, but then started to eventually morph over time into something that I really wasn't because it was all about them and not about me and us
Mm-hmm.
and what I could bring to the table. So I think really if I go back and kind of unpack that a little, it's really knowing that uh, what I was looking for was someone who wasn't looking to change me from being who I was. In other words, I love people. I like being around people. I love my friends, spending time with them regularly because that was something that we did. We would meet up every month to just catch up with each other and spend time together. I think relationships like that are important. And some of them I'm still quite close with even all these decades later.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was part of, like, I guess I must have been really thinking about at the time without really putting a name to it, was that I was just looking for someone who, first of all, wasn't going to try to change me, but I also went into it with the intent that I wasn't going to change, that I was not going to change my lifestyle, and I don't mean like where I was rigid, where things, I didn't like have some compromise, but I wasn't going to go in and change the person that I was. I was still going to, have my friends' nights, maybe not as often as I was doing before when I was single, but I still had those times. I made sure that it I didn't get lost in a new relationship and forgot about everything else because I had a life prior to that. So I guess
Right.
that's really like, I mean, I really didn't have, what we're talking about today is really an important topic. I have my values now around my life, but before I didn't really know that because unless you've really kind of, this wasn't really, I guess, at the forefront. We're now talking openly. Everyone in the world seems to be talking openly about self-development. But before, when almost 3 decades ago, because that's how long it is has been that I've been married, I didn't really hear about self-development, or it wasn't really on my radar. And so
Right.
now it is. And so I've learned that since. But back then, I guess that's the easiest way for me to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I also wasn't in the personal development or self-improvement kind of arena back then either. I guess I was circling around it a little bit. I was in that mindset, or trying to be in that mindset, because I was helping other people, even though I didn't really know what I was doing, or there wasn't really any guidance for me as to how to do that. I was helping other people try and make themselves and their lives better. I didn't turn that lens onto myself until after my marriage fell apart. So as far as values go, when I met my wife, which coincidentally is not long after you and your husband got married. I think it was within a year of when you and your husband got married is when I met my wife. So it was around the same time period. I also didn't know what I wanted so much. But to look back now, the things that I valued the most at that time, even though I didn't really pay any attention to making it a conscious choice, was being seen and heard. If I could meet somebody who saw me and heard me, that person had my life's devotion. Like I would dedicate my life to that person. And right around the last year or two before I met my wife, I had met several people who had given me some of that. I started to feel seen and heard a little bit for the first time in my life. I was in my mid-20s, and I'd been trying to get this recognition since before I was 10 years old. Probably since I started school, 5 or 6 years old. I wanted that recognition. And I wanted not recognition as in, good job, I love what you do, but I want to be seen and for who I am. And I wanted to feel heard, like my thoughts and my opinions, that I wanted them to matter. And for the first time in my life, I'd had a few people who were giving me some of that. Some of what I said and some of who I was being, was having an effect on other people's lives. So when I met my wife, that was a big deal for me because I had struggled being seen and heard for my whole life, and then being seen and heard by a woman I was interested in was something I'd never experienced before. I'd had a couple of girlfriends, so there was some physical attraction that I'd experienced, but not anything close to intimacy or really feeling like they understood a little bit about who I was. And my wife was the first one who did that, which is why, even though we were toxic and we both recognized it within the first year or two, maybe 2 years, I stuck around for 20 years because that feeling seen and heard really was a key value for me. And again, even though she didn't completely see me or hear me, it was only parts of me that she liked and parts of me that she recognized. As time went on, I realized that those parts weren't even who I was, but I still felt it. So for me, that was the values that I was looking for when I met her. And ultimately, those were the values that made us not compatible in the long run, because who she thought she was looking at and who I thought I was were not who I really was deep down in my core. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion, why I think you and I decided on this discussion, because we want to help people early on in their relationships to really align with the person you're dating. How do you know you align? Well, it requires 2 steps. I mean, it probably requires a lot of internal processing, but it requires 2 basic steps, even though they're both fairly, big steps. One is to know what your values are, and 2 is to know how to talk about your values and hear and understand your potential partner's values, or the values of the person sitting across from the table from you on a date, right? So I think that's where you and I were, at least for me, that's where I wanted to have this conversation, is to help people really understand things that I had no clue about when I was, first dating. Right? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think it's important to know how another person views life, what they stand for, because that really is that's a clue for you, a really big clue, really, whether or not this person is compatible in the long term, like in the long run.
Yes.
Because if somebody believes something that you absolutely is like, it's a major red flag for you, then that is something then you'd have to explore. Is this really a red flag? Is it something about myself that it triggers? Is there something in my background is why this triggers it this way? Or is this really something I just don't feel the same way about how their views on life are in this particular area? And is that going to be a game changer for me? Because then you can, like, save both of you time. It doesn't mean that the person is horrible, but it just means that maybe they just don't match. And that's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to come along, and maybe they're going to hold more of the values that you're looking for. And maybe a couple of the values that they have, or one of the values they have, is not a game changer. It's not necessarily how you feel about something, but it's not enough of a game changer to make you step away, that then you can think, okay, I can step into this with a little more confidence in exploring the relationship further. So I think values really is big. As I was alluding to earlier, just specifically when I really started, stepping into self development, I this was way back. This was back in 2016, and this was during a very traumatic year. I think politically, the country was, here in the U.S. was, there was a lot of, toxicity going on in the media, the coverage. People were on social media bashing each other. And I was watching, you know, some of the people that I knew for decades, you know, bashing each other. And I felt like, oh my gosh, don't say something that you can't take back, because you're saying this publicly. And it was really it was so unfortunate to see. And so that's when I really leaned into my own values, like to really, like, okay, what do I believe in? And I went through a process through someone that I know, a woman that I had met. She helped me really hone in on them, like a little. Actually, I didn't really meet her until a couple of years later, but she helped me really hone into them. But I had already decided on one of my values, which was integrity. And that value to me meant that I was not going to comment, I was not going to post, and I wasn't going to share negative social media content. And the reason why is because I didn't feel that served people. We all have an opinion, but it doesn't mean that it has to be my way or no way. If you want to have a healthy discussion with someone, great. But publicly, when you start bashing each other, I didn't like that. So I know I went off a little bit, but this is really about relationships, anyways, even your friendships. And so for me, that was my very first core value that I leaned into, that I created for myself, was for me, that was doing the right thing. And that meant not, as I said, not commenting, posting, or sharing negative content because I didn't feel it served people in a positive way. And I'm all about sharing positive vibes so that people, live with more joy and gratitude and love. And I'm not about that negative vibe. That belongs somewhere else. I don't believe it belongs on social media, in a way where the people are start to get really heated and start calling each other names. So that's where that started for me. That was my very first foray into understanding and really start recognizing what do I stand for. And I think too that helps with once I started getting my own real core values that I finally put in place, which are integrity, empathy, kindness, courage, and honesty. Those 5 core values now are part of my life. They help me to navigate my everyday and in my relationship with that. As I said, I've been married now uh, for 27 years, over 27 years, and those values are how I show up in my marriage as well. And so that's important. I think really that value that when you know who you are, like what you stand for, it's really helpful in how you show up in your relationships and the people that you will seek out to be in relationships with. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I like that. And right around that same time for me is when I started also um, experimenting with my values as well, because uh, 2016 is the year that my ex left, and I was devastated and distraught and depressed and suicidal that whole year. Like I was just having a really bad year. And it was in that year that I decided I'm not okay with trying to be something for somebody. I'm finished with trying to fit somebody's mold of who they think I should be. So one of my first core values was, I guess you could call it integrity. I called it being true to myself. But I didn't want to do it the way I saw a lot of people doing it on social media. Again, much like your reaction when the country was in a big mess in that year. I saw a lot of people, because of course I was freshly out of a long-term relationship. I saw a lot of posts and videos and things like that on different social media sites of people who were fresh out of relationships or who were talking about take care of yourself and don't lose yourself and all those kinds of things. And one of the things that I saw as a common theme that I actually didn't like was things like don't lose yourself in a relationship and they're not worth it, and you need to take care of yourself first. Because a lot of the message that I was getting from those social media posts was almost anti-relationship. This relationship hurt you, so don't get into another relationship, and make sure you avoid this kind of person and that kind of person and this kind of person. And I heard a lot of information as to what to avoid in relationships, how to stay out of toxic relationships, how to avoid abuse, and how to stop, dangerous and bad things, and how to avoid narcissists, and how to avoid this kind of bad person and that kind of bad person. And I'm like, if I focus on avoiding all the bad things, I'll never meet another person the rest of my life. And I don't want that. I mean, I'm depressed and lonely. The last thing I want is to prevent myself from meeting more people. So I wanted to learn how to stand up for myself, how to be independent, how to not lose myself in somebody else without trying to avoid all these toxic characteristics in people. It's not that I wanted to invite those characteristics in, but I decided that if that was my focus, then that's all I would see. And I wanted to open up the possibility of seeing positive characteristics instead. So one of the first values was to be true to myself. One of the second values was to give people, all people, no matter how dangerous, toxic, or narcissistic, or whatever, abusive that they potentially could be, no matter what negative potential I saw in them, I wanted to search for the positive potential. I wanted to see if there was good qualities that I could attach to in people. And I made some brilliant friends in those first couple of years after my ex left. And some of them turned out to be very selfish and toxic and, harmful. But I didn't experience much of that side of those people. I didn't experience much of their toxicity. I didn't experience much of their abuse. I didn't experience much of their negative characteristics because I wasn't focusing on that. And although they did use some of those characteristics against me sometimes, that wasn't the major experience of my relationship with those people. I remember I was helping a friend of mine had introduced me to a gentleman that he was doing some work for. That friend wanted me to take over doing that work because my friend had, a very busy life and didn't have the time to help anymore. And I was, single and seeking some money, so I started helping this guy with the things that my friend was doing. And this guy, by a lot of standards, was a selfish and toxic kind of a guy. And although I experienced some of those characteristics, most of the time I ignored them. And I just saw, his passions, his hobbies, his values, and, how unique he was and how special he was. And it took a lot of pain and anguish to get the money out of him that I had earned, which was one of the toxic traits. But when we were working together, it was mostly good. I had to do some pretty extreme things for him, but then that's the kind of guy he was. He wanted to work with people who were willing to do that. And for a while I was. So for me, the first value was being true to myself or in personal integrity. And the second value was not judging people on their negative qualities, but instead judging them on their positive ones. Not completely ignoring their negative ones, just not putting the priority in that place. So I wanted to, compassion, benefit of the doubt, believing in the goodness of people. That was one of my second values. And as I started meeting other women, I started valuing those women who not only didn't want me to change for them, but also wanted to see the goodness in people. And I met this wonderful lady, and we ended up dating for a couple of years because one of her biggest values was seeing the goodness in people. Right? One of her biggest values was wanting to share compassion, joy, and happiness. And that really brought us together. And we split up a couple of years later, actually, because some of our secondary values didn't match. But a lot of our core ones did. So that was important to me, this idea of personal integrity and compassion and empathy, which are values that you yourself have shared. So I share those as well. And as I've discovered more about myself, I've been able to more and more align with people who share those values. So yeah, I appreciate that.
I like that because, that true to yourself is important. It's so hard sometimes to actually be confident in being who we are. I guess people call that authenticity, um, because we might not like who we are, or we're not confident in who we are. We feel we're not good enough, all of those things. So I like the fact that even through the hard times that you're going through emotionally, um, in 2016, that you decided, like, you wanted to really be more true to who you are. But you also then decided too, which was really, I think, a step of courage and faith, because people can be really hurtful, not meaning to all the time, but you were quite vulnerable in that time. And so, but you still allowed yourself to be open to meeting people where they were at, in no matter who they were, you know, if you want to call it flaws and all. And you allowed them to present themselves, because again, and you came from a place like not judging, because that's the biggest part too, is we're not always the best of ourselves at every moment of every second of every day. Like, we're not. And you might meet somebody when you're going through something and it's just not your best self, but that's not who you really are. But in the moment, you're in this emotional state, and you may be, giving that first impression that isn't necessarily, the impression that you want to leave on someone, especially if you're meeting someone new. And so I think it's really important, like you were saying, not to judge people, because you just don't know the road that they've been walking, and you just don't know if something really traumatic or something is going on in their lives, because we all have lives separate from each other, and we're not always there, we're not always present, and even the people that we know in their life, and there might be bad behavior there too. And it's just being open and honest, that if you can turn it back on yourself and say, if I had those moments in my life where I've just not really been the best of me, and have I shown up that way in situations with friendships or in personal, romantic relationships? And the answer is going to probably be yes. I would have to say it's going to be yes. So being able to, like what you were saying, have that, this decision that you made around that time, after being married for such a long time. It may not have been, like you were saying, the relationship may have been falling apart, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you spent 20 years of your life with someone. And that, and you don't just walk away, like, you don't walk away just clean. You don't walk away with, no emotional connection. I mean, you also had children. So I think it's really, really important that people recognize that sometimes you just have to allow yourself to be okay, that you're going to meet people that might not meet your core values. You might meet people who do meet your core values, and like you were saying, in one of your newer relationships, that someone did, but then the secondary values didn't meet. That's it is about figuring that out as you go. But in the beginning, I think it's really powerful to think about it right out of the gate, so that you can save yourself time going into a relationship that maybe is not a match from the beginning, so that you're not wasting their time, you're not wasting your time, and you can actually open yourself up to the actual person that you have been looking for to step into your life. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that.
I agree.
Oh, your mic's a little bit off. Ah,
My
there we
mic's
go.
not working.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you for that. The It is important to match values as much as you can early on in a relationship, because although it's hard oftentimes to have those conversations, especially early in a relationship when you're freshly attracted and you're feeling that chemistry, and you're feeling butterflies in your stomach and you're feeling all the warm and wonderful feelings, and you don't want to risk losing that. And it's a really big risk to share your values at that point and ask for theirs, because if they don't match, then you have to face the fact that those warm and fuzzy feelings probably won't last. And nobody wants to stop those warm and fuzzy feelings, right? But as we've been saying, doing so in the first few months, first couple of months, the first few weeks, if you can, well, you will lose that warm and fuzzy feeling and all the benefits that come with it if you don't match values. If you don't match values, what you will save is a tremendous amount of heartache down the road. And while I don't want to lose those warm and fuzzy feelings, I'm willing to, if it means not having 20 years of relationship and losing it then. Because that's 20 years of time I could have spent finding somebody who does align with my heart, who does align with my core values and my secondary values, who will appreciate who I really am deep down, and who I can appreciate who they are really deep down. Well, I don't want to lose those warm and fuzzy feelings. I'd rather do that than lose the lifetime together. I recently was dating a girl. I think I might have absently mentioned it once or twice on this channel. A few months ago, I was dating a girl, and we only made it, I think, not even 3 months, because we started talking about some of those core values. And while it did hurt to find out that those values didn't match as much as we both had hoped they would, it hurt a lot less than 20 years together would have. You know, rather than a year, maybe 2, to get over a lost relationship, it was a weekend. I was depressed and lonely for like 2-3 days. And while I still miss her and the warm and fuzzy feelings I got from her, I am not devastated to the level I was when my ex-wife and I split up. And while I don't want to lose those warm and fuzzy feelings, I would rather that than the second bad option. Now, if your values align, if you do find out that you're good together, that you do share some core and deep values, and that even some of your secondary values match as well, you can, it not only increases those warm and fuzzy feelings, that chemistry, that puppy love feeling, that honeymoon stage, it not only intensifies that, but it gives you permission to lean in. It gives you the confidence, the faith to lean into that feeling. Because now we've shared our values. Now we do know that there's a really good chance this thing can work out. Because we've talked about those things. So the benefits when you do match far outweigh the cost of when you don't. And although I haven't found that yet, I've gotten close with a couple of different ladies. And I really look forward to that match. I'm somewhat envious of your relationship with your husband because of that. I say somewhat because I'm not actually envious. I truly believe that's available to me also. So I'm grateful that you have it, because that gives me the belief that it does exist in the world and I can have it too. So that's what I want. I want somebody who truly sees me, who truly hears me, and who wants to continue doing so for years into the future. And I'm willing to try a few potential matches that don't work out. I'm willing to try probably many potential matches that don't work out in order to find the one that does. And for me, that's kind of an extension of that, of the value of compassion and and empathy that we were talking about earlier. Not only do I want to give people the benefit of the doubt and try and look at their good qualities, I'm so committed to that I want to do that with people I'm attracted to, women I'm attracted to, even if it means that I go through tons of times where I get my hopes up and they're dashed. I'm willing to do that over and over and over again, because one of them, that won't happen. At some point, I'll find somebody that does want to grow old with me, and we do share those core values. So that's worth it to me. That's worth all the potential hurt and all the lost warm and fuzzy feelings that might happen, to find the one who does align. And I'm willing to take that risk. That's another value of mine. The risk, not just in relationships, but the risk in life. One of the other things I decided when my ex-wife left is I'm done playing it safe. When I got laid off from my job a few months after she left, got kicked out of my home that we'd been living in a few months after she left, I said, this is it. I'm done playing it safe. I don't want another job. I'm committed hardcore to building my own financial future. I didn't quit my job to go get it, but I didn't make a lot of effort to find one to replace it. And that's where I've been there ever since. The closest I've had to a job since then was a part-time that gave me 1 or 2 days a week. And that was not enough to live on, I promise you that. So that was one of my values, and I'm committed to that for the rest of my life. I'm committed to living my own life and finding somebody who wants to share that with me, because they want a similar life to what I want. So that's what aligning values looks like to me. I'd like to know a little bit about how you and your husband have found aligned values, because like you said, when you first got together, you didn't know much about this. But so how's that worked out since you've been married?
Yeah, so again, this was a lot of, I guess, trial and error. I've been married a long time before I really, as I said, stepped into learning about me. That was where I learned how to communicate my needs. Was going through a journey to self discovery, to learning to love who I am, and being able to like speak up for what I wanted. And it began, I mean, it started before I got into the self development space, where I started speaking out more, because I started actually hitting that place in my life where it's like I was no longer happy. I wasn't happy with my choices, the lifestyle. I really was miserable. And I think when I decided that, hey, we need to make some changes, was was when I recognized that, well, I still wanted him in my life, but I wanted to make changes together. And so we had the conversation, and we were living in California at the time, and we moved to Las Vegas in 2018. And I started my journey into self development. I started learning about myself. I think that was probably one of the most valuable lessons I learned, was healing myself. I didn't realize that I was broken in certain areas of myself. And when I started healing from within and found that power that came from really being able to say, "Oh, you know what? You're good enough. You're an amazing person, and there's so many great qualities about you." And being able to say that without being afraid of owning that as my truth, um, was then I started living from that place. I started, as I said, I created my own. I doubled down by working with someone on my core values, and ended up adding, the empathy, the kindness, courage, and honesty portion of my core values to what I already had in place, which was integrity. And what I found was that that was really helpful because that allowed me to come from that place. You can't make someone else be what you want them to be, and especially because I went through this in a different way to getting to the values like beyond chemistry, beyond, like knowing that first of all, do I want to be still in this relationship that I've been in for, 20, well, seven, what is it, like 5 years ago? So 22 years by that point, and going through it, do I want to still be in that relationship? And the answer was yes, I did. So how do I do that? Well, I learned that you can't make someone else change, but you can influence others by just being the best of you. And so I started doing that, and learning then to one of the biggest things that I learned was my communication style. I always used to communicate from the emotional perspective. I couldn't communicate outside of that. And so in the moment of something, whether we were in a discussion and if I was getting emotional, I was still trying to communicate, and it was being lost because then his emotions would get triggered, and then we really weren't communicating well. And so I learned to, first of all, as you were saying, you wanted someone to really listen, to hear you. You wanted someone to really have someone hear you and be willing and open to understanding your perspective, even if it's not in agreement with what they are thinking. And that's what I learned was he just wanted the same thing that I wanted, to be seen, heard, and understood just as much as I wanted that. So when I did that work and then started living from that place, it helped him to start feeling like more comfortable and confident. And now we're communicating better because we understand that we need to be able to, in order to be able to have a relationship that we have built now 27 years, over 27 years, and we want to continue moving forward, that we need to learn to communicate with each other in a way, and it's not just about one person doing more. It's not about pointing fingers about someone who isn't doing enough. It's being able to say, regardless of what the past has brought us, let's look at what's today and moving forward. So I think with our values, we've talked, we know what we want for our lives. We know where we see our life going, and it's together. We're moving forward together because we have plans to, experience life together. So that's kind of like how we came to. It was through my own journey. It was through me working on me, through me healing myself, because I brought a lot of my baggage with me into our relationship, and that baggage was influencing how I communicated. And when I learned to be able to let those things go in a way that no longer was influencing how I was, responding to things, it made for better communication coming from me. It made me become a better listener, not only for in my relationship with my husband, but in any personal relationship I have with friends, with my clients, and it just makes it easier knowing that, again, we have 2 ears for a reason. That's so we can fully hear, and we have a brain. So if we can just take the moment to listen first, allow ourselves to process and really hear the person, and so we can understand their perspective and not take it as a dagger at our heart, but more of this is the person, how they really feel, what they're thinking. So let's discuss it in a way that's healthy. And that's, part of our values. It's like really being able to, I guess if you want to call it a secondary value, learning to listen better, learning to be able to communicate better, and being open to the other person's ideas and perspectives. So I guess that's really how we've been able to manage so far. It's not perfect because we still have our moments, but that's what life is. When you do life with someone, it's not about creating these values in the beginning and then you have secondary values and then you go through life and everything's perfect. No, it doesn't work that way. It's still because over life you're going to change. You're going to work together and change and maybe and you might grow apart. That's always a possibility of that happening. But you go through life together. You figure it out together, and you decide whether you want to continue down the same path together, and and continuing to make sure that if this is the person that you want to be with, that you do have values that align with each other. And if they don't, then you talk about it and figure it out. And is the relationship worth saving and continuing forward, or is it, you know, change for both of you? So that's kind of like, I guess, in a nutshell, for us, why I think it works well, because we are willing to have those tough conversations even when we don't agree.
I love that. Not only did you go through your own personal healing and self development journey, but doing so gave your husband the space to do that himself. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a, or else kind of a statement. It was a, well, I'm doing this. And, I think it'll help me and it could help us. And by doing so, you just happened to develop some skills that not only made you a better Leslie, but a better wife, a better friend, a better sister, daughter, like all the things, right? Every relationship in your life changed, improved. The other thing I wanted to really focus in on a little bit is you're the only woman I know who's gone through personal development after being married, who stayed married after going through personal development. I know a lot of women and men, once they've gone through personal development, they don't want their relationship anymore because they're a different person. They've realized who they are at their core, and that isn't who my husband or wife thinks I am, and I don't want that anymore. And they don't want this new version of me that isn't actually new. It's just always been the old version of me. Just it was underneath the version they thought I was. So most people that I know who go through personal development are either fresh out of relationships or they're in a relationship that's not bringing them joy. So going through that actually gives them permission to leave the relationship. Whereas you did feel some discomfort in your relationship when you went through your healing and self-development journey, it strengthened your relationship. And I really admire that about you and your husband because it shows it's a great example that going through personal development doesn't break up relationships. Going through personal development increases your relationship with you. And if your relationship with other people is inauthentic, then you might not keep those relationships. But your relationship with your husband wasn't inauthentic. Yours was completely authentic. You just didn't quite know who each other was and who yourselves were. But at your core, you did still enjoy each other. You still did share those values, right? Those deep seated values were in common. You just didn't know so consciously, which is what makes your relationship with your husband so magical. So I wanted to call attention to that because it is one of the beautiful examples of why personal development is an advantage. It's a good thing to do regardless of your life situation. Married, single, wanting to question my marriage, wanting to question myself, employed, unemployed, liking my job, hating my job, any of those things. Those are all situations you went through and you came out of them differently than other people that I know. And I love that about your story. So I wanted to call attention to that because it really exemplifies something that's not common in the personal development world, that you don't have to lose everything to improve yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think partly too is my faith really played a big part in that because, I have a relationship with God and I took my vows seriously to the point where it was like, why am I giving up? Why would I give up on my relationship if it's just something that I can work on to heal myself? And I have taken it to God, even like, when I feel like we're not communicating, when we're not connecting, it's like I've asked, like, can you help me here, because I'm not seeing the bigger picture and I know you do. So my faith is a big part of why we're we're still together, because I truly believe that I don't have to do it alone. I can take it to him. So that's part of the reason why we're still together as well. um, but yeah, I mean, some people stay together. I know a lot of couples that are, that have gone through the self development and now they're questioning, but they're still together and they're trying to figure it out. And I guess it just, with time, like figuring out the beyond, let's say, personal development, because now we're talking about beyond chemistry. But if you are in a relationship and you're married and now you're like, okay, I've gone through this, I've changed, I'm a different person. It's not about I would say it's not just about throwing in the towel and say I don't want this person anymore. It's like, what was it about them in the first place that you were attracted to?
Yeah.
Are they still that, and can you build from that? Can you build? And because, again, it's not about changing the other person. That you were attracted to them in the first place the way that they are.
Yep.
And maybe over time they changed a little bit, but so did you.
Yep.
And then you went through development and you changed even more, and you became, as might think, a better version of yourself. And you like who you are. And now you're with a person that you're not really quite sure. But does that mean you throw in the towel? I don't think necessarily that would be the case.
Right.
You can actually, heal your relationship, but it's now looking for those, again, discovering your new values and
Yes.
beliefs to see if they can align with the values and beliefs that when you first got together. And then just coming into every interaction with your romantic partner, with your friends, with your family, from this new person that you are, this new improved version of who you are, that you love so much, and just allowing that person to show up without judgment or criticism from around the other people. And that's where I think is why it's worked for me, because I didn't just go through it and start thinking, picking apart, oh, he doesn't match this anymore, or I'm a different person. No, yes, I became a different person, but is that fair for me to say, well, you didn't go through the development journey with me. You're still this old version of yourself that was matched with the old version of me, and now I'm not sure we match anymore. That's not fair, because I'm not giving that person a chance. I'm already judging, and
Yes.
I'm not allowing for growth. So
I
that's why
think
I say it's important.
I think that was the secret that I most admire about you and your journey of personal development is you recognized fairly early on that, look, I'm just dropping this on my poor husband. He doesn't know where the hell this came from. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. And sure, he might not have gone through the same journey that I did, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to. That doesn't mean that he wants me to stay the same old grumpy person I was before. And if I give him a chance, and I mean a lot of room, not a weekend or, a few days, but maybe a year, maybe a few years to figure out his own journey. If I give him enough time, maybe he will want to change. And lo and behold, guess what happened?
Mhm.
Like, you guys figured some stuff out. You had some hard conversations. You committed to your life together. You you relied on your faith when your relationship didn't seem like it was going to work out, and you stuck to it. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody should do that. What I am suggesting is the same thing that you said, is that I committed to my relationship, and unless something was actually bad, like harmful, I wasn't going to leave. And I think that's where you and your husband had that benefit, because he's not a dangerous man. Like, he's not harmful. He might not have aligned with you in some ways, but once you sat down and had some of those conversations, you figured that out, right? And the relationship that the two of you have now, some of the conversation based on some of the conversations you and I have had off camera, is absolutely brilliant because of that space that you've given him to grow. When you dropped the bomb on him, when you started like becoming this other person, who the hell's this? Right? But you had the space to recognize that he might not know what the hell's going on. And I think that's the magic that allowed you to really go through the healing and development process without having to lose your relationship to do so. Just understand the other person in the relationship isn't going through the same journey. And I think that's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's important to recognize that. So thank you. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and this has been a really great conversation, but we wanted to make sure that we closed out this series to give you a little bit more insight around like dating, and you're ready state, and you want to find the partner. It doesn't have to be perfect partner, but a person who at least can be as close enough of a match for you, and that also you're a match for them. And we wanted to make sure that you're able to like at least now go out and have some tools that can help you to with confidence to find that person to spend whether hopefully your life with, because we are meant to go through life together. So we've closed out this series today, and we're so happy if you've been watching us, if you've been joining us. We're excited that you've been on this journey with us. We're looking forward now to stepping into a new series, and we can't wait to start bringing that to you. We'll be bringing that to you next week, same time at 10 a.m. Eastern. So, yeah, I think that's it. Do you have anything you want to close us out with, Andy?
Just stay tuned, people. We got more stuff coming, and I think you're going to like it. And of course, the YouTube standard, like, subscribe, and share, comment, tell us your thoughts. We want to know if any of this stuff is landing with you. We'd like to know if there's other topics you want to talk about. And specifically on this conversation, I'd like to know, what are a couple of your core values? And have you managed to share those in your relationship? So thank you for watching. Join us again next week for the next version of what we've been doing. This is an evolution of this same series. We'll go to the next series now, and we're looking forward to the next stage. Thank you for joining us for so far for what we have experienced, and we really appreciate all of you. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. So see you soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.